Welcome to the fastest stop in town. Today, Masechtas Menachot stop Pei Dal, and we're going to begin on Pei Gimel Amud Beis, the middle of the Amud, starting with a new parak, new Mishnah. Kol karbonos atzibur b'hayachid. When it comes to all the different karbonos, they can be boim in arts and chutz arts. They don't have to come only from Eretz Yisrael. They can come from chutz arts. For that matter, min achadash, min yashan. They can be new or old. Chutz min ha'omer v'shtei halechem she'enin boin el min achadash min aretz. When it comes to the omer, which is brought on Pesach, and the shtei halechem, which is brought on Shavuos, so there's the exception that it can only come from Eretz Yisrael, and it has to be new grains. The kulin enin boin el min ha'mucher has to be from the choicest, the highest quality. Be'ezim mucher shalhem. So what's the best? So the Mishnah gives a list. Machnes v'zadcha alsadis l'soyus. So this location is the highest level for flour. Shnia, the second best, lahen, is Ephorium babika. Okay, so in the valley, in that place, is the second highest quality for soyus. Kol haratzos hayuk sheros. The truth is, all lands are kosher for a mincha. Ella mikayna hayu maviin. This is where they brought it from because they always wanted to bring the highest quality. Says the Gemara. So masnisin delo ki haitana. Our Mishnah is not going to be like the following opinion. Desanya, as we've learned, Omer haba min hayashan. If you have the Omer on Pesach, the barley offering, which comes from old grain, kosher, that is allowed. Now, our Mishnah said that when it comes to Omer, it can only come from Chadash and not Yashan. So we see this is clearly not like our Mishnah. And for that matter, the Shtei Lechem is the same thing. Ela shechiser mitzvah. Even though technically you could use old, nonetheless it's chiser mitzvah. Okay, so Omer, how do we know by the Omer that even if it's old, it's okay to chsiv? Takribes minchas b'churecha, that you can be makriv, which is mashma, this language is mikol makoim, in all situations. Yafil min ha'aliyah, even literally from the higher levels. What does that mean? That's referring to yashan, like stuff that is like in a storage facility. Obviously, it's not new, the fact that it's there. So, the fact that the pasuk has this riboy, that it says takriv, it comes to tell us that it could even be yashan. And as far as the shtei halechem is concerned, chsiv mimosh v'seichem taviu v'lo min chutz haaretz. It says that you're supposed to bring it from Eretz Yisrael, but not chutz haaretz. Mimosh v'seichem, though, is v'afil min haliyah, that even yashan. So where does it understand? Hafikde. We already used this pasuk to tell you that when it comes to the shtei halechem, that it has to be from Eretz Yisrael, not chutz haaretz. How could you learn not to say two separate things from the same pasuk? So Makra taviu b'afil min aliyah. So we learn it from a different part of the pasuk which says taviu. But I thought we needed this shekol shiata maybe mamakam acher, that if you bring it from another place, right? If you bring a mincha from chutz la'aretz, harihu kazeh, then it is like this. This is Rashi. This is I meant chametz. So shekol shemedi mamakam acher chametz yehi kazeh isar nechala lohavi lachmi toida. It's coming to tell us two things. So again, says Rashi, Shekolata maybe makam acher. If you bring chametz, then the din is it is chametz yehei kazeh yisaron l'chala. Should mean yisaron for chala l'havi lachmi toida. So I've ksiv rachis. I understand. You're telling me you can use old. It says rachis, which is mashma only chadash new. Yeah, that's only the mitzvah. I haksiv chadsha, which is also mashma that it's only new, not old. So hamiboyel going to sign you. Nasdin, Rabbi Kiva Amru, they both said that the shtei halechem habois min hayashin ksheris. That no, it's not true. It could come from, unlike our Mishnah, it could be old. Which is mashma that it has to be new. It just means shtei chadasha l'chol menachos. It just means that you don't bring anything before it. So when it comes to these karbonos, it could come from old grain, but it just means that it has to be that there was nothing that preceded it. So that's the idea. Okay, let's look at question 10. So we said rachis is a mitzvah. It says by the shtei alechem mincha chadasha, right? It says v'yikraftem mincha chadasha, right? We say that by Sfiras Omer. It must be that it's new grain, not old. No, it just means when it says mincha chadasha, chadasha l'chol hamanachis. Koimer she'aviu shtei alechem. The shtei alechem on Shavuos is brought kodem l'chol hamanachis before any mincha. Of the shtei halechem atzman nefil min yashan, but that itself could be old. Okay. So back to the Morris. Ad kan lo pligi el b'chadash. The whole argument is, does it have to be new grain, or it could even be old grain, as we continue to pay down with the olive. However, everyone agrees that it has to come from Eretz Yisrael and not from Chutz La'aretz. So come on, do ki haitan. It's not like this time. It's not like this Tana. The Sanya, Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yehuda, Omer, ba mechutz la'aretz. Actually, an Omer could come from Chutz La'aretz, not from Eretz, even not from Eretz Yisrael. Amanim emakayim kisab al aretz. Right? It's pretty clear. It's supposed to come from Eretz Yisrael. It just means shalom nischayim ba'omer kodim shechnus al aretz. It just means there was no chiyuv of bringing the Omer until we actually entered Eretz Yisrael. The ksavar chadash b'chutz la'aretz deraisahi. Dechsim Moshe Vayseichem kol makom she'atim yoshim mashma. It's more in Kedushin. So the mitzvah of chadash is actually also in Chutz La'aretz. So therefore, the whole idea of having something in which is a matir for the new grains, so it's okay. You can use this because they have the same dinim apply in Chutz La'aretz as in Eretz Yisrael regarding chadash. Kol makom she'atim yoshim mashma. V'chi savoi Zman biyahi. That only applies when you actually entered Eretz Yisrael. Kivan deraisi, but since it's deraisa, karuvinami makrivin, you could bring it even from Chutz La'aretz. So that's the whole point of all this. Okay. All right. Let's maybe find another question here. TA, no. TB, no. NTC, no. Okay, no questions here. Okay, let's keep on moving. All right. Tanan Hassam. So that actually would be a good question, right? So we can actually the it's all totally, and whether you hold Chadash is deraisa or is B'chutz La'aretz is deraisa. If it's deraisa, then you should be able to bring it from there too. Tanan Hassam. So we learned in Masechta Shkolim. Shaimri Safichin, when it comes to those who are guarding the aftergrowths, B'Shvius, and it's on Shemitah, so Noitan Schar Trumas Alishka. So we will allow them to be paid, and they're compensated from the Trumas Alishka. So Rami Barcham Rav Chisda, so they post a point. Question. It's non Shari Safichin B'Shvius, when it comes to those people who are watching the aftergrowths, Noitan Schar Trumas Alishka. You're telling me that they can collect from Trumas Alishka or Minhu. L'achla v'lo sreifa. The pasuk says it's l'achla v'lo sreifa. By Shvius, the produce can't be burned, and we burn the kaimitz on the mizbech, right? So how is it possible that we would use this? Okay, in general, this stuff. It says Rashi, Lafi Shehem Hefker, since it's Hefker, V'Sarchel Shama, you have to watch it, Mimnei Achaya, Mimnei Haniyim, people may take it, Shol Ketuhu, Koidem L'Oimer, that they shouldn't take it before the Oimer, Kadei Shehel Oimer Bo Mehem, because we want the Omer to come from it. The problem is that you have to burn some of it. And if it's Shemitah, how are you supposed to do that, right? You're not supposed to do it. Understand, if you tell me that you can't bring on Shemitah, then there's no such thing as Oimer offering at all, like every 7 years. So it's like you have no choice, even though you're right. It says Lachum, which is Drush Sreifa. In this context, it's different. I'm not telling them not to do it. Lacy, I'm saying to bring it Midish Takid from last year's grain, right? Just use the old grain. My answer is no. You can't use the old grain because be'ina carmel veleka, because it needs to be carmel. As Rashi says, hey, carmel rach l'molois b'shas hakatzir. At the time of the harvesting, it needs to be soft to be able to for the processing of this carbon. So v'leisi mekarmel dishtakit. So why don't you just use caramel soft grains from last year? So caramel takrit. The pasuk says you should be makriv it while it's soft. Being a caramel b'shas hakrava v'leika. It has to be caramel not at the time of the harvesting, but at the time of the hakrava. And if you're going to use it from last year, then that'll be a chisaron of caramel, and therefore you can't use last year's. So you have no choice but to use this year's, right? And you're going to tell me what you can't do it because of achmul sreiva, and it's going to then there'll be a problem that it won't be able to do it at all. Itmar of Yochanan Oimer Carmel Takriv. So because that must be this year's grain, Rabbi Elazar Oimer Reishis Ketzircha. Reishis Ketzircha v'loy soif Ketzircha. The beginning of your harvest and not the end, namely not last year's grain. So it's basically the same thing, we're learning out from a different pasuk. So Ma'isiv Rabbah. The pasuk says Vim Takriv Minchas Bikurim. If you're makriv the Minchas Bikurim, the Minchas Ha'omer Kas Madaber. So this is actually referring to on Pesach the Minchas Ha'omer. That's what this pasuk is going on. Mehechin Hiba. Where does it come from? In a Sa'ir. And we know that on Pesach the Omer offering comes from barley. So how do we know that? Maybe the Pesach offering of the Omer is made out of wheat. I know it's barley. So Rabbi Elazar Omer, it's through the following drush. Nemar, the pasuk says of the Mitzrayim, that it was ripe, this grain in Mitzrayim, and this pasuk is specifically in Makas Barad, in the time of the hail. And Nemar aviv l'dairis, ma'aviv hamer b'Mitzrayim sa'irim, just like over there in the Psukim, it's talking about the hail smashed into the barley. So so that's how we know it's got to be barley. We're not from Makas Barad. Rabbi Akiva we find, as we had before, that when a yachid can bring his obligation from wheat, which is like a typical mincha offering, or maybe cholvaso min hasairin, and sometimes it's made out of barley, right? So that's also true. Maybe cholvaso min hachitin, maybe cholvaso min hasairin. So we know when for the tzibur it's from wheat, the shtei lechem. But so when do we ever find that a chayiv of the tzibur is from barley, right? It must be. It's referring to the omer, because ima to omer min hachitin. If you tell me the omer is from wheat, then matzinu tzibur shemei b'chavas min hasairin, right? So therefore, it must be that this is another raya that the omer is barley. Okay. Davar another interpretation. Ima to omer. If you want to tell me that omer ba min hachitin, it comes from wheat. Ein shtei lechem bikurim, then the shtei lechem will not be bikurim. It will not be considered as the first wheat, and it's supposed to be bikurim, the first grain. Now, if you already brought wheat from before, then on Shavuos it's not bikurim. It's not considered to be your first. Alma mishum bikurim hu. So we see that the whole apparently it needs to be bikurim. Right? Tiyofta. So again, according says Rashi, the boy she be kurim bikatzer v'hainu kurebi lezer the emer reishis katzirchem. The tiyofta the Rav Yochanan the emer carmel takriv. It's supposed to be soft. Damash b'shyachal hakriv carmel for b'sheinu bikurim. Right? No, it's supposed to be bikurim. Okay. Tiyofta. Tanan hasam. So let's look at question 11. Nemer aviv b'Mitzrayim v'nemer aviv l'dairis. Okay, so we're talking about the Omer on Pesach. So it says Im takriv minchas bikurim Hashem aviv koli, but nilmad deba min hasairin. It's considered barley because it says ki hasaira aviv. Because regarding the pasuk over there by the Eser Makos by Barad, it mentions explicitly saira barley. Okay. Tanan Hasam. So we learned in Bikurim Ein Mavian Bikurim Chutz Mishivas Aminim. We know that we only bring Bikurim, as the pasuk says, Eretz Chita, Sa'ira, etc. And the pasuk when it says Davash, it's not really talking about honey. Rashi says it's Davash Tamarim, it's dates. That's why it's wheat, barley, olives, dates, figs, grapes, figs and pomegranates. So those are the 7 grains. So or 7 fruits that are brought to the Kayin for as Bikurim. V'lo, as we continue on to Samech Dalet Amud Beis, v'lo mitamarim shibaharim, but not the dates that come from up in the mountains. Even though it's true, you could say, well, that's among the 7 there, but that's not. Says Rashi, inu muchar lafishin chushin. They're not of high quality; they're substandard quality. Therefore, that doesn't count. V'lo perish shibumokim, for the same reason, not the fruits in the valleys. Or ma'ula im havi, if you actually did bring them lo kiddush, then you would not have accomplished anything. So Yosef Rabbi v'ka'omer lo hashmaisa. So he's saying over the sugya, and Esvei Rabbi Achabar Rabbi asks a question. It says carbon ratius. So what do we learn out from that pasuk? Shnei ratius l'chol menachos. It should come before all other karbanos. V'cheinu oimer, as the pasuk says, "Bakrivchem mincha chadash l'Hashem b'shavua seichem." Einu elo chadash shel chitim. I only know when it comes to wheat. Chadash shel sa'ir minayin. How do you know the same thing applies when it comes to barley? Talmud l'oimer chadasha. Fine. Im enu inu chadash shel chitim to inu chadash shel sa'irin. So that inu Indian is talking about barley. Minayin shehi kodemus libikurim. How do we know? As Rashi says, "Shalo yavi bikurim koidem l'shtei alechem," that you can't bring the bikurim even before the shtei alechem. Talmud l'omer v'chag Shavuos tasalach. So on Shavuos, bikuri katsir chitim, the first of the harvesting of the wheat, and that's what's supposed to be done even before bikurim. Veinuli ela bikuri katsir chitim, the wheat katsir sa'ir menayin. I know the same thing applies when it comes to the harvesting of the barley, that nothing else should come before it on Pesach. Tomer b'chag katsir b'churi masecha shetizra b'sada. Veini ela shetizra, who is seeded. Olu me'aleihem menayin. How do you know if it grew up by itself that the din is the same? Talmud l'omer b'sada. It's in a field, which means even if it wasn't necessarily grown by a farmer or whatnot, nonetheless the same din applies. Veini ela b'sada. But now the rabbis shibigag, shibacharva, sh'otzis, sh'svina. How do we know that we include? There would also be a chiyah bikurim when it comes to things that grew on a roof or in a dilapidated building or in a flower pot or in a boat. So it's a reboy. Okay. So again, what we learned is that you must bring the shtei halechem even before these bikurim. So Menayin Shedhei Kodemas on the Sachim. How do we know it comes even before the libations? Uperis Elon. So Nemar Kan B'Korei Masech Menamal Holon B'Asrochas Masecha Min Hasada. Mal Holon the Sachim Uperis Elon Avkan the Sachim Peris Elon. Ketani Mia. But what do we learn? Shibigag Shibacharba V'Shotzitz V'Shibusvina. So we see these things as Rashi Meditani Hachi Shema Minan maybe Bikurim Mehen. Obviously, you can bring bikurim from these things. But kolshkein mitamarim shibaharim. Certainly, these growths of dates in mountains or in the valleys, the adivim they're better than that. The mevian mehem bikurim b'kashel ula. So why does ula say over here that even though it comes from these 7 minim, that he excludes the tamarim shibaharim and peris shibamakim, right? It's kind of hard to understand because we see clearly over here that you can even bring it in these cases by on the gag or a chorba. So how do we understand this? So we're into Seifa Toin Lumincha Lumenachais. The Seifa that says that you can be on a gag and a chorba, that's not referring to bikurim, because bikurim, no, because you can't bring bikurim even from these tamarim shibaharim. What are we talking about is by a mincha, which we're not as strict about, and therefore because of that we allow these different things to be brought. You can bring flour offerings from there. So Maskam Rav Ada Barava Yihachi Hainu said the pasuk says Kol Tar Bevetzcha Yochel Isai. Anyone who's pure in your house can eat it. V'chi Menachos L'Zichra Kahuna Demis Achlin. Is it only for the male Kohanim to be able to eat a mincha? So apparently it's not talking about a mincha. So Amara Misharshi Trey Kroiksib. It was actually two psukim. Pasuk says V'cha V'ksiv, and the pasuk also says Kol Tar Bevetzcha Yochel Isai. So Ha Ketzad. Is it belong to you, or is it only you, Dafka, or anyone who's pure in your house? So kan bi bikurim, kan bi menachos. So when it comes to bikurim, the pasuk says kol tar b'veizcha yachal isai, right? Anyone in your house can eat it. But when we're talking about a mincha, it says l'chayeh deinechon el zichri kahuna. Okay, so that's the distinction. By a mincha, so it's only a kohen male, but when it comes to bikurim or more lenient, others can eat it. We're talking about a mincha over here, so how do you understand this? The seif is talking about the lachme toida. Rav Yochanan, and this is an argument to Rav Yochanan, because Omer he says im havi lo kiddush, that if in fact you would bring from these things, it would not sanctify. Fine. So nasa kichochosh b'kodshim. He says that it's like you weakened the kodshim. So Bisham Rish Lakish Kedi Taima. He at least gives his reasoning. El Rav Yochanan my Taima. Why does Rav Yochanan say that if you brought it low kaddish? Why not? So Omer Rav Elazar. Rabbi Yochanan Chazoy b'chaloi, because he saw in the dream Milsa Mal Yasa, great matter. Amina, that he said, Aimer Kra Me Rashis, Lokol Rashis. The fact that it says Me Rashis means that it's only certain things, namely only the Zayin Minim, excluding everything else. Me Artzacha V'Lokol Artzacha. It means only in the land, but not all the land. So if it's hills or valleys, etc. No. Reish Lakish, Hai Artzach HaMayav. What does he do with that passage? Rabbi Gamliel, Bar Rabbi Yomer, Never Kan Eretz, and Never Lahon Eretz. Mal Lahon Shvach Eretz. Over there, it's the praising of the fruits. So Avkan Shvach Eretz, V'idach, Eretz Eretz, from the Idach Me'aretz, V'idach Eretz Eretz, Lo Mashmalei. Tani Chada, on one hand, we learned that Shibagag, when it comes to a roof, V'shibachurban, a dilapidated building, Shiba'atzis, and Shibazmina, maybe Bikurim. Not only can you bring Bikurim, but you can also make the decoration. But Tani Idach, maybe in a Kaira. So one place says, they all say you can bring the Bikurim from these things, but one says you could also be Kaira, one says you're not Kaira. Now, Bishlam Reish Lakish, I can understand Reish Lakish's opinion, as we just said, in the situation of if you brought it, he says it's kadosh because it's nasa kechochosh b'kodshim. So, how does he understand this steer about a gag? So gag kasha. Ha b'gag d'mayra. One is on like a roof on the top of a cave. Ha b'gag d'bayis. And one is a roof of the house. In the cave, the roof is still like in the ground, so therefore you could say the psukim. Churba lukasha, kan b'churba avuda. One is like a cultivated area. Kan b'churba she'enu avuda. Otzitz lukasha, so we can probably gather what this is going to be. Kan b'nekuva, kan b'she'enu nekuva. If it's a perforated pot, so then it's linked to the land. If not, not. Fine. Says Rashi, Haditani maybe v'kaira b'churba avuda the kivan din nenavda the tarichba mi artzach in the land. In fact, you did your matriach, so it's considered like artzacha. Okay, and then finally, so that's nekim not nekuva. Svino kasha kan b'svina shel eitz kan b'svina shel cheres. So if it's made out of earthenware, then you can be maybe in kaira. Says Rashi Mishum to shel Eretz Yisrael, because it's like connected to Eretz Yisrael because it's made out of cheres. But eitz, you would be maybe, but not kaira. Okay. Amid Aleph, El Rabbi Yochanan Kasha. So Tanohi Desanya, Shibagag, on the roof of a cave. Shibachorba, again, it was a wood that was cultivated, maybe Kaira. Shiba Otzitz, and Shiba Svina, Enu maybe Kol Iker. So this is an important wrinkle. Maybe, not that you're maybe at Venu Kaira, but Enu maybe Kol Iker. V'chul and Enu Bois El Min Mufchar. Chul Samarle Yuchna Umara Moshe. He said, Teven Ato Machnis Lefraim. Armalahu Amri Inshi Lamata Yarka Shokol. Says Rashi, Teven Ato Machnis Lefraim. Ephraim who makom harbe tavua. He lived in a place where there was a lot of grain. Ato maybe Ashim Tavua Limchor. Maybe you can go over there and get some grain to have them to sell. But Tmiya, Kach Eretz Mitzrayim, Shimaleik Shofim. Egypt is filled with witchcraft. Ato Bo L'Sham V'Asek B'Kshofim. If you go there, then you'll end up doing that. La'ir Shegadol Sham Yerik, in a city in which they grew a vegetable, Harbi Haba Yerik Shulchal Limchor, people are going to come to sell it. Lashimis Kapsin Shan Hakoil, everyone gathers there. Liknois Haim, Armalo Dibri Leitsonos, V'Humeshulahem B'Inyanim. Okay. Yarka Shokol. Okay, we're going to stop there. Let's see a couple more questions. Question 12. Tanicha, the one place that says the roof and the chorba and the otzitz and the svina, you're maybe kaira, and the one says you're maybe enu kaira. So how do we answer these questions? So for question 12, if we're dealing with the roof on the cave, then you are maybe kaira. The bias maybe enu kaira. Chorba is not a question. If it's a avodah, if it's cultivated, then kaira. If it's not a avodah, then not. If it's an otzitz nokuf, if it has a hole, then you'll be maybe a kaira. However, if there's no hole, then you're maybe a kaira. Sfina lo kasha. So one is of cheres, which means that it's like Eretz Yisrael, it's connected to Eretz Yisrael because it's cheres. So therefore, you're maybe a kaira, but if it's eight, it's not. Okay, that was question 12. TA3. Paris hagadol ba'otzitz. If you have fruit that grew in a pot, ma'adin le'inin bikurim, ba'otzit sheno nokov, ba'otzit nokov. This is a little bit tricky if you didn't catch this. So it's a machlokas on both cases. So it's a machlokas if you're maybe ve'enu kaira or the enu maybe at all. Okay, and so again, if you're dealing with an otzitz which has no perforated pot, it's not, there's no hole in it, so either you're maybe and you're not kaira, or you don't, not maybe at all. But if there is a hole in it, so there's a machlokas if you're maybe in kaira or enu maybe at all. So in both cases, the other sheet is you're never maybe, right? And the other opinion is either maybe the kaira or maybe the enu kaira. TB 6. Peros hagadol ba'otzitz. Madin l'inyan bikurim otzitz sheno nokav ba'otzitz nokav. Exact same question. So let's mark this up. Pei dalid omid beis. Pei hamadal. Pei. Let's just keep it as pei dalid omid beis. And that is question. Let's make it pei hamadal also. So that is TB 6. TA3 TB6. Okay. All right. TC 30. Same question. Well, almost the same question. So I'll just write this TC 30 here. So I wrote Yesh Hevdel Begag Shibabayas Begag Bimara. Bechorba Imavuda Lu Avuda. Otzit seems that Otzit's Nokaveno Noko Besvina Bishel Eitz Umishel Cheres. I didn't explain, but hopefully that was enough. Adkan.